deep dive interviews with music gear inventors, builders, creators, and tone chasers. The Gear Gab Podcast with Eric Dahl uncovers the behind-the-scenes stories of the music gear that inspires us. And now, here's your host, Eric Dahl.
We're so happy to have on the show a friend of mine that I've known for a number of years. He's an incredible pickup builder and also amplifiers, but he is a man of many gifts and many skills. Vaughn Skow, thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Eric, thanks for having me along on your wonderful party of gear nerdery.
Well, if anybody knows that, I think you do from you and I, our multiple entanglements throughout the years. But I want to talk a little bit, Vaughn, first about, you as a musician and everything, and also as a studio builder and studio owner, before you got into actually building the great guitar pickups that you do now. So essentially, Vaughn, when you started out, Midwest farm life, kind of like myself, you started out kind of doing DJ stuff in high school and building PAs before you moved to Nashville, Tennessee, I believe in 1985, correct?
Yeah. When in the time and place where I grew up, which is the Minnesota-Iowa border in the 80s, there literally wasn't a musical outlet of any kind there. We had to travel to like Minneapolis or something, which was like another world for kids. And we did have a Radio Shack, praise God. And so that means that, that I was building sound systems and light systems and things like that from the time I was about 14 years old. And I will mention, I actually did make my first pickups at age 15.
Wow.
Me and one of my buddies, Dave, each got a Hondo 2 Strat copy.
Oh my gosh, I've owned it.
And you know what I'm talking, yeah. And this was during the period of like Van Halen 1 and 2. And
those
so
wanted to be a Strat, but they couldn't, and the necks were always kind of clunky.
it was pretty lunky.
And the finish was like just glommed on them, man. I don't know how many layers of polyurethane they put on those Hondos.
Well, I tore mine apart, took a couple of the pickups, reverse the polarity on one, wired them in series, and made a humbucker out of two of them, and screwed it right into the wood in the back, threw the pick guard away, took the volume out off, and just fired something up. Yeah, and then not long after that, my buddy who had his, a guy named Dave Ellison, who ended up going on to be one of the founders of the band Megadeth, Dave said, "Hey, can you do it for me?" So, and I was literally, chiseling out the interior of the guitar with a hammer and a screwdriver, and it was rude and crude, but we ended up with guitars that kind of were like Eddie Van Halen's.
That is pretty incredible. I did not know that you started doing the pickups that early because, once again, going through your background, I got to learn some interesting things about you, Vaughn, that I did not know previously, because I know you from your great, pickup and amplifier work. But doing that at such a young age, and then you moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and start, build your first studio. And then I also, you worked with a number of universities here in Nashville, helping build out their studios and programs also, right, Vaughn?
Yeah, I moved to Nashville officially to be a songwriter and maybe a little bit of a singer, a player. Turns out that the bar was really high.
We found the same thing, Vaughn. When I moved here straight out of high school, from Jackson, Missouri to Nashville, and went to Belmont to be a rock star, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of hungry rock stars here.
Yeah.
Maybe I could go back with Plan B and go into mass communications and do TV and radio, and there you go.
Wow, yeah. In that time, when did you move to town, Eric?
The first time was 1982, so straight out of high school.
Just a little before me.
Yeah. Went to Belmont. I mean, I love Belmont. I met a lot of incredible people. I learned, jazz guitar from John Pell, and learned a lot of guitar that I carried with me that I still use today. because then I studied classical back in Missouri. But well, it's just intimidating. In your little small town, Vaughn, as you know, it's like, wow, you're a pretty good player. You really
Jackson, Minnesota for me.
so there we go, Jackson, Minnesota, Jackson, Missouri, and then you come into Nashville, and it's like everybody's amazing. I mean, I always make the joke, Vaughn, and you know it's true as well, to where it's like you'll go to Taco Bell or wherever, and the person serving you is probably a better guitarist and songwriter than you are.
Right, right. Well, and that time, in the mid '80s was really a high watermark, especially for Nashville songwriters.
Oh yeah.
The writers were incredible. So, my little suitcase of songs that I thought was going to make me, a millionaire, pretty much immediately got stuffed. And it turned out I was a better audio engineer than most.
Oh, now let's back up. Let's back up that a little bit, Vaughn, because you're not going to brag on yourself, and I will. You have run audio for some of the biggest names in music. I think I'm just going to come to mind, Marie Osmond, Garth Brooks. I mean, how many huge A-list artists, A-list, have you run audio for? Go, come on, share.
A number of them, and a lot of it was really interesting. The first place I landed in Nashville
Yeah.
was the Bluebird Cafe, where I
Oh my
became,
gosh.
the main house sound engineer there.
And that's become an institution, as you and I know, thanks to the TV show Nashville.
Right, right. Well, and we did, for the Turner South Network, I did a television show out of the Bluebird called Live at the Bluebird Cafe,
I remember that.
a songwriter, based show. But when I first came to the Bluebird, that's where I met people like Garth Brooks and Tracy Lawrence, and because they were hanging out there. They were doing writers' nights there. They were doing open mic nights there
Before they made it big.
before they made it big. Yeah. So that kind of funneled me into, I just people got to go, oh, Vaughn, yeah, he's a great sound man. You should use him.
Yeah.
And so lots of people, I did their original showcase down at the Bluebird, and then they said, well, hey, will you go on the road with us?
Oh my gosh,
and
Vaughn.
and
Is that, and now I got to ask you that too. Is that how you ended up playing with Tom T. Hall for 7 years? I mean, how did that transition happen?
No, Tom T.
Well, you to tell anybody this,
Tom T. Hall,
say that
believe it or not, my very first recording studio in Nashville, when I sold out that studio, the equipment went to a guy named Tony Tolliver, who you probably don't know, but he had a record deal for a minute. And then he sold the equipment to a guy named Brooke Langton, and Brooke, at the time, was playing steel guitar and dobro with Tom T. Hall. And so each time the equipment was sold, they had me come and hook it up for them. And that was a 16 track, analog rig, if you will.
And that's what I learned on in Belmont too.
Oh, isn't it?
It's like with the big tapes and everything. It's like, which once again, you and I still love that sound. I love the warmth of it, to where you can't get that from Pro Tools. You can do a lot of cool stuff in Pro Tools, and certainly you can, multi-track, as you and I know, and ping pong and all that stuff. But man, there was something about those big reels of tape. And I know a lot of people now are building out vintage studios like you had in the 80s just to capture that sound again.
Oh man, a Neve console and a fat track tape machine, and you don't have to work. You just turn it on and go, whoa, that sounds great. Especially if you got the right mic.
Right. And also the right performers and everything. But I mean, touring with Tom T. Hall, because I remember as a kid, Vaughn, watching, seeing Tom T. Hall all over TV. I mean, from the Glenn Campbell show, Bobby Goes Girl,
His
every
show,
TV show,
Pop Goes the Country, was his show.
Goes the Country. I mean, Tom was everywhere because he had such a huge body of songs, and everybody just loved him because they were all family. They were just down home songs, Vaughn. But what was that like touring with Tom?
Oh, it was, well, to set it, I wish I had a picture of what I looked like when I was with Tom, because this was the mid '80s, and I had huge hair, and I generally ran around in jeans that were more whole than they were jeans, and cut up t-shirts, and it was a great time for me. I remember getting on the bus. Tom never had rehearsals or anything like that. It was just learn the songs and do the songs, do them the way the records are, end of story. Um, and I remember getting on the bus that first day, and the roadman and I was in my ripped up jeans and a piece of a shirt, and
Oh,
the road manager looked at me and he said, "Whoa, Tom's gonna have a fit, man. You gotta put some real clothes on." And then Tom walks up himself.
yeah.
He looks at me and he says, "They're wearing it that way these days, aren't they?" And I said, "Yes, sir, they are." And he says, "Looks good on you." And that was the start of just a golden period. For some reason, Tom just really liked me, and we broke all kinds of taboos on all kinds of things that it was like, "Oh, Tom won't go for that." And I'd do it and Tom would go, "Yeah, that's good." So, uh,
What an amazing time to be here in Nashville, Tennessee, and then to be able to work with, Tom T. Hall, but also, your time at the Bluebird and all the TV shows you produced and everything. Also, it's like, you've had a storied career, Vaughn. And besides the amazingly cool logo that you created that's on your coffee cup and also behind you, it's like the first time I saw you, it's like going, it's like, and I've got to buy, and I'm going to purchase them from you, a t-shirt and a coffee mug of my own. Because I was going to bring up the story, to where you and I got to spend a lot of time together at the guitar builder deal in Germantown, to
our
where
build workshop.
guitar build workshop to where, and it's like we spent the whole day together, and it was just a lot of fun to where you got to build your own guitar. And like you said, I think they're still doing that now, offering it to groups and stuff like that to where you start out, they give you the neck, the body, the electronics, you get to finish it, you get to wire it, you get to brand the headstock with the logo. And by the time you leave that day, Vaughn, we had a finished guitar.
Yep, that was fun. That
But
and what a uniquely Nashville experience.
oh my gosh, totally. I want to get back to, and you've made some incredible amplifiers over the years. I know a lot of artists play your amplifiers, but truthfully, Vaughn, you're known for your pickups, and you and I were talking about it, and I learned something the other day for having you on the show. But not only do you create your own pickups in all of these different formats, from single coil, P90, humbucker, you name it, but you told me you're also able to take vintage pickups, even the cheaper ones, like some of the foil and Tysco and all that, and rewire and bring those back to life.
Yeah, yeah, I love rebuilding vintage pickups. I mean, obviously, rebuilding a PAF or something like that is the holy grail of, gotta get it right, gotta make it good. Um, but yeah, I do like the speed bumps that were in K's and Tyscos and stuff, and
Yeah.
gold foils. I did a couple of de-armand elevators even, which are a really interesting pickup to tear apart and rebuild. But I have a love for those guitars. Those American guitars of that era, the K's and all of the sub brands, Old Craftsman and Sear Silvertone and all of those things.
Dan Electro.
Yeah, I love those things. And I've even rewound original Dan Electro lipstick pickups, although
Oh my gosh. Wait, hang on, but a lot of people don't know,
that's difficult.
that has to be difficult because they actually used they were actually lipstick cases then, because that's what they bought and put them in.
And coil wrapped on basically nothing. Just a magnet with a coil wrapped around it, stuffed in that lipstick tube.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know how you do that, but I want to bring this up too, Vaughn, to where it's like, kind of like we've seen from like other companies like, Fender, to where they have like, the hand crank and all this. I mean, how, and explain to you for, viewers and listeners for the podcast, Vaughn, what is your process? Because, some people may not realize the science behind this that you're applying with the magnets, with the correct wire, with the correct number of windings. I mean, there's a lot of important things that goes into creating this, not just like where Les Paul shoved a stylus into an Epiphone. There's a little more to it.
Well, first of all, I'll give you my overall philosophy on guitar pickups.
Yeah.
And that is that, there was a golden era, basically 54 to 64 or somewhere thereabouts, give or take a year or two, where the Gibson and the Fenders were just absolutely spine-tinglingly magically good, right? And nobody ever is going to pick up a 59 Les Paul, a 62 ES 335, a 57 Telly or whatever and go,
Oh,
this is a good guitar. I think I'm gonna have to change the pickups though. Well, j hold on, I should put a caveat in there, which is except during that crazy period in the 1980s when we were, going to
but you bring that up, Vaughn, because it's like, I was talking, for the TV show, for the Rock and Review, I had Jorma Kaukonen and we were talking about that to where it's like, yeah, back in the 70s and 80s, they were just old guitars. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is a 59 Les Paul or this is a 64 Stratocaster. It's like going, I think I'm gonna load some EMGs or some Seymour Duncans in here. It's like going and they were that's the holy grail they are now.
and then throw away those PAFs that are now worth tens of thousands of dollars a set,
Just for the pickup. Just for the
Yeah.
pickup, Paul.
just for the
Like you brought up on the Gibson ES335s, with the PAFs that they're so well known for and some of the Les Pauls and all that. I mean, those are highly sought after pickups, just like you and I were talking about with the pre-CBS Fenders, to where it's like, oh my gosh, if you've got those pickups, it's like, oh,
I know you can take a set of 59 Strat pickups and put them in almost any Strat copy and it'll sound like a great guitar.
right.
So that's sort of my philosophy. Now, every time somebody comes out with something really new, like lace Lumitones, I don't know if you know what they are, really bizarre
I've
looking.
got them in a Jay Backlight guitar behind me.
So, I always buy everything new that comes out, the Fishman Fluence, for instance, just to see kind of what's going on. But the truth is that none of that, stacked humbuckers for noise canceling in a Telecaster, for instance, or whatever.
Well, and yeah, just like the stacked single coils,
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. A stacked Telly pickup,
yeah.
which turns it into a humbucking pickup. All of them have a thing, but the truth is, it's not as good as a real PAF or a real, original 57, 59 spec Strat pickup. And
Well, and let's talk about that too, Vaughn, which, you're much, I mean, you got a degree in this, you're much more studied than I am. But essentially with pickups, like you create and like other people have done, for decades, you're trying to capture the sound of the guitar strings with this pickup that is then transferring the sound for us through cable to the guitar amplifier so it could be amplified.
mhm.
That's the essence of it.
Yeah, the word is transducer, something that converts energy from one form to another, and and the pickup converts the mechanical movement of the strings into an electric signal, which, goes to your amplifier and is made into a larger electric signal, and then it goes to the speaker, which converts the electric signal back into mechanical movement, back into air moving in the
You do that
room.
so much better than me, and that's why you're the professional on it.
And this is, for instance, one of my copies of actually an early patent applied for. I don't know if you can read there, but the sticker on this one is a patent number sticker. And I like doing these reproductions as well because sometimes people will get, this is appropriate for a guitar just after the the patent applied for stickers, right? For instance, and sometimes some
Also, Vaughn, to where when you're doing these and you're making your own versions and everything, like, are you hand cranking the wire? I mean, how
you know what? On again, here's my philosophy on that. Single coils, absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt, are hand wound, right?
Is that can do that scatter thing?
And they're nice and thoroughly scattered. As like when I used to, right now I don't have anybody working for me. I'm doing them all with my own two hands. But when I used to hire people and we were winding, I would always say, try to make it as random as possible. No two wires should lay equally on top of each other. Mess it up as much as you possibly can. But then somehow, when all is said and done, have somebody be able to look at the coil and go, oh, it looks so nice and uniform. But yet it's incredibly scattered within that.
And that's what's so interesting to me also, Vaughn, to where it's like back when, talking like Leo Fender and all this kind of stuff, to where it's like a lot of this stuff was done by accident. You know what I mean? It's not like, it's not like Leo and Ted McCarty and some of these people go, oh my gosh, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to make the best sounding Fender pickups, the best sounding, patent applied for pickups, with Seth Lover and everything. It was by accident.
Oh,
And then
hey,
it ended up sounding amazing.
for what it's worth, the Telecaster and the Stratocaster were almost by accident. Leo didn't know how much he got it right, you know, as evidenced by the fact that, he never patented the design of the Strat or the Tele. He literally was like, well, it's just stupid. It's something I like drew on a napkin. I mean, anybody could come up with that. Why would I patent that? It's like,
But but Leo Fender was a lot like you also, to where Vaughn, he started out, as you and I know, building amplifiers, with Don Kaufman and everything. So he was doing amps and all that kind of stuff before he got into, doing the guitars and the pickups and all that. But also, I got to bug you on this one because I'm learning stuff from you on the magnets. Like, how do you decide which magnets go into which pickups to change the sound? Because I know that changes the sound.
yeah. So the historic kind of way this moves is in the world of Fender pickups. If you go back to sort of the earliest Fender pickups, which would be 1951, 52, the Broadcaster, Nocaster,
From the Nocaster.
first year of the Telecaster. Those were all Alnico 3 concoction, which Leo chose because it was the cheapest. Leo was very frugal, and an Alnico 3 for the purists isn't really Alnico because it doesn't have any cobalt in it. That's aluminum, nickel, and cobalt is what Alnico stands for.
Okay.
But that's a relatively weak magnet, I guess you could say. And it's very, that sound is very sparkly and alive, bubbly, if you will. I think like Sultans of Swing, that kind of tone.
And you know what I love about that tone in those pickups also, and from playing those instruments, is that it's not, they're not hot, not like a lot of, particularly once we got to like the, the Seymour Duncans and the
Not at all.
those. But what I like about them, Vaughn, is it makes the amplifier work. And so it's just, they just do what they need to. They're not like overdriving the tone and the sound and all that. They're just taking it and sending it to the amp.
Well, and then from there, Leo went to the more powerful Alnico 5 magnets, kind of when that composition became affordable, if you will. And then that was what sort of finished out the end of the pre-CBS era. And now we're talking about 57, 59, 62 in that era. And they also, and that's a little bit more, now we're talking Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone, right? We're talking Jimi Hendrix's tone, a little,
back.
That's a little, those magnets are a little bit more powerful. They're a little bit more firm and in your face. And also in that time, it went through some wiring change. They started out with something called heavy formvar wire, which formvar is sort of an early form of a plastic coating on the wire.
Okay.
And that was a thicker coating, which meant that you couldn't really put as many windings on a pickup because it was this thicker wire. And then they went to something called plain enamel, which was the cool stuff of the day. Now it's a vintage. And it was a thinner coating, so you could put a few more turns on it, and
Right.
at any rate, and then so the combination of Alnico 3 magnets versus Alnico 5 magnets, the heavy form var wire versus PE, very much so changes the tone and kind of indicates, like, for instance, Blackguard Telly, the original early Tellys, that's form bar wire with Alnico 3 magnets, and then shortly they went to PE wire with Alnico 3. But by the time you get to white guard tellies a little bit later, now you're plain enamel wire and Alnico 5 magnets, and that's like,
Right.
The Bakersfield telly sound, the Merle Haggard telly sound, a much, a very bright in your face kind of
Oh
sound.
my gosh, and those sounds once again so good with with Don and Buck. And I was going to ask you also, Vaughn, if you could explain to me and for our viewers and listeners, what is the difference? Because I know like back in the day, like when we were teenagers and everything, it was a thing for people to like wax the pickups. But then also you have people that use like a varnish, and so I mean, and why and what's the difference?
Yeah, yeah. So I watched an interview on California Public Television where Eddie Van Halen said that he was the one who invented wax potting. Honestly, I think it was Seymour Duncan, and Eddie just happened to be in the room at the time. But
Yeah, because Seymour, as you and I know, and from meeting and talking with Seymour, I mean, once again, one of those innovators and geniuses in the realm of pickups.
yes, I can very much so see Eddie complaining about feedback and Seymour being the one to go, I know what that is and I know how I can fix it or whatever. And so the whole concept is that, so especially with because, Eddie was using PAFs that he took out of, historically, that one that was in his first guitar that recorded Van Halen 1, that pickup, supposedly the Lorias came out of a 335.
Wow.
Which is, again, you just mind-boggling, and evident
Especially
like,
since, and you and I were talking too about how Eddie was, taking these like Mighty Mite bodies and all, because I mean, as teenagers at that time, you and I were, getting those magazines and going, oh my gosh, I want to build that. And they had like, with the Mighty Mite bodies and the necks and all that. And you'd order your parts and you start building your own Frankenstein.
hence my Hondo 2 that turned into my oh, and I might also add that in addition to, to the homemade humbucker and throwing away the pick guard and all the controls and all that,
Right.
I also took out black tape and striped it up and painted it with black and white stripes. So
Okay, if we're gonna, share, I have to share with you that I decided I was going to do a Yngwie Malmsteen on a Hondo, and so I took a Dremel tool and I scalloped the entire neck. But if you're not gonna do it an expensive like a Fender or something, and so yeah, it was a Hondo.
do you still have that guitar by chance?
No, but my guitar teacher I think still has that because he was so enamored with it because obviously at the time I couldn't afford an Yngwie Malmsteen guitar. So I'm like going, I'm going to get a Dremel tool and I'm going to make it.
You know what? I think I think he's a common buddy of ours, John Satella, Elmo,
Yeah.
telly player who does all of Brian
Yep.
Wampler's demo
Oh my
stuff and
gosh.
shows and
Oh
stuff.
my gosh. Yes.
A fantastic player, and he brought me a few years ago, he brought me his first guitar, or at least his first real guitar, which was a Squire Strat that he had done that to, that he had literally dremeled out and scalloped the frets on. Um,
And it's like, and it's like, once again, we all learn from these things, just like, said you've turned it into a career, but it's like going, man, it's like, in our heads, it's like going, I can do this. And then it's like going, it comes out, not perfect, but playable, you know? But that's also why I rely on, experts like yourself on the pickups because it is so important. And we haven't even touched on all the pickups, Vaughn, to where it's like, you've got your mini humbuckers, you've got your P90s, you've got, your Filtron, in with your crutches and everything. What talking about your pickups and the evolution of what you do, and I know also, that you are making a lot of drop-in replacements for a number of different guitar brands. How have you developed the Vaughn Skow pickup line?
So again, going back to my original philosophy, which is that everybody who comes up with something utterly bizarre and different makes a pickup that maybe is interesting, maybe is unique, maybe sounds a little different, but that the holy grail tones still come from that, 54 to 64 period. And what Gibson and Fender were doing, some Gretsch filter, some of the early Filtertrons and the High-Low-Tron, which is basically half of a Filtertron, also very, very, very good. That was,
Played those too.
well, High-Low-Tron, that was the pickup that was in Malcolm Young's guitar that recorded all of the real
Oh my God.
parts on AC/DCs.
You talk about a guitar though, also it was like, he took out the whole neck pickup and all it had was the bridge pickup. I've always wanted to do that to a Gretsch, just to go, there's my Malcolm Young guitar.
Yeah, well, and make sure it's a High-Low-Tron too, that's a very, very, very low output pickup. People think,
But I mean, he sounded so good with the wall of Marshalls. Like when I saw him, when Malcolm was still alive back in Vegas, Juan, and I mean, it just sounded so good. And a buddy of mine was the bass tech at that time for Cliff. So it's like, so I'm getting to wander all around the stage and all that, and look at Malcolm and Angus's, walls of amplifiers. It was amazing. But what a sound with one pickup.
I know. It do one thing and do it well.
Yeah.
So, but so as we talked about, all of my single coil pickups, the Strat and the Tele pickups, I wind by hand because, in the good years of Fender, they were all wound by hand. And we talked a little bit about the when we were talking before about the infamous Abigail Ybarra, who was hired by Leo way back in the early 50s, as like a teenage seamstress and worked for him for like close to 60 years.
Yeah, I just remember the video on that Vaughn where it's like before she retired, and to where everybody, once again, Holy Grail pickups, people were looking for the pickups that she had made. You know what I mean? Because they were, and it's like, and you were saying too when we were talking on the phone about she's talking doing the interview while she's winding a pickup, and it's like, am I bothering? No, I'm good.
Right? Yeah, she's not even really watching, and the guy says, "Do you need to pay attention to my bother?" Nah, it's good.
I'm a pro.
She's like, "I've done this for 50 years. Come on." But then, she had, like, her apprentice was a gal named Josefina Campus, and Josefina's apprentice was a gal named Brisianda Penna or something like that. And the crazy thing is that all of those pickups now are considered to be master built pickups,
Right.
And so all of my single coils are hand wound with a great scatter. And again, that seems to be very, very, very important with single coils. Single coil pickup.
And I got to bring up also, Vaughn, those pickups of yours, besides what you've done in the different, humbucker and other pickup range, those have been very popular for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So this is one of my labors of love. I call this the Fullerton White 59. But it's because it's got red and white, for Mr. Fullerton and Mr. White from Fender. But at any rate, the Strat pickup, as you can see, the actual pole pieces are the Alnico magnets themselves.
Right.
And in this configuration, the way the wire, and like I said, see how it looks like it's really nice and uniform and all that, but it's
that's
actually
a thing of beauty.
But it's actually very, very, very scattered within that seemingly
And it doesn't look at all wrong. And I mean, but also the bottom line is, as we know with pickups, is the sound. All of those elements together that you're putting together between, with the bobbins and with the magnets and with the correct wire and the correct windings, that's what makes the magic, right?
And now one thing I'll mention when it comes to both, humbuckers and single coil pickups is, those original machines that Abigail was winding on back in the 50s and that Fender was using, he built out of sewing machine motors, and the counters were literally analog counters hooked up with a rubber band. And so the count varied a lot. And plus,
Right.
again, Leo, as frugal as he was, if the wire ran out and it was within, say about 10% or so of being what it was supposed to be, he'd say good enough.
Right.
Um, and and so you ended up with, for instance, some strats. I had a 59 Strat in the shop that I got to do a complete blueprinting on, and it was a great, great, great 59 Strat.
Wow.
And this particular one, some of the pieces of that guitar that made it as good as it was it just happened that the pickups are what in the modern world we would call calibrated, meaning the bridge was a little hotter than the middle, and the middle was a little hotter than the neck. They didn't do that on purpose back in those days, right?
Right. It's not up now to where that is purposely done.
That is purposely, and I do that with my sets. I keep them within vintage specs, but the
Yep.
bridge is on the hottest side of vintage specs. The neck is on the lighter side of vintage specs, and the middle is placed right in between, so that as you go through all the positions, the 5 positions or 3 positions, depending on what your switch is,
Right.
that it feels right going through. It doesn't feel like the bridge is just a little bit too weak, for instance.
Right.
Um, so I'll mention that. Another thing I'll mention is the humbuckers. They were never hand wound, right? They were, those original machines were designed by Les Paul. And there was this really we get on all these rabbit holes, but this really interesting story I've heard Les Paul talk about, where he went down to the factory one day and found his machines in the dumpster out back. And he was like,
Right. And then I know too, once again, we're such, gear nerds to where it's like, when Les Paul did the log, and all that kind of stuff, or, he cut an Epiphone in half and basically used a 4x4 to make this stuff. And then the evolution of the different things that he did, like even with that low impedance Les Paul Vaughn, where it had the low impedance pickups, and then like the one he played at the Iridium had like a microphone built in it, like all this stuff. I mean, he was constantly tweaking, but he was also working. He would have the ideas, as you and I know, but then he was working with great engineers to help do some of this stuff.
I did a blog on his log guitar, and how his whole point was that an electric guitar, it's really more about the pickup than anything else.
And he proved it.
And he proved it. Yeah. So the humbucker pickups, I do in fact machine wind.
Okay.
And I wind them as close to, the conditions of the original PAF winders as possible, with one exception, and that is that my counter is digital and can't vary.
And it's not held together with a rubber band or made by Singer.
Yeah, exactly. And so my humbuckers are vintage spec, vintage wound, and I found out that for whatever reason, these are too much smaller coils, and of course in a humbucker the magnet is this square magnet underneath the pickup, and
Right.
it just transfers, the north and south poles to the screws and slugs. Um, and there seems to be, because I've tried over and over again and had a whole bunch of ears on it, there seems to be no benefit to scatter winding on a humbucker.
Mm.
What's really more important is that you get the recipe perfect. That you have the right amount of turns on each coil. I also hand charge all my magnets.
Wow.
Typically speaking, a pickup manufacturer, they throw 100 magnets or whatever into an industrial gausser, hit the button and they go, and
We've
they all
seen
get
it.
charged to something that's more or less full charge.
Right.
Um, again, having had the opportunity to blueprint so many vintage guitars and vintage pickups, uh, I've been able to kind of see, well, what, the pickups that everybody says, oh, this is as good as it gets. What is the Gauss on them? And let's try to nail that instead of just.
You kind of reverse engineered this, Vaughn, with the pick,
Oh yeah.
with the what we consider the holy grail pickups.
Oh, very, very much so. And again, my leader in all this was Seymour Duncan. I don't know if you know this, but back in the day, he unwound every pickup that he would rebuild, he hand unwound it.
I didn't know
And
that.
he published, and I've got a copy of it printed up on my wall. He published the specs for, every pickup that he unwound to say, okay, it's got 7,850 turns of 42 gauge plain enamel wire, and it's a 1969 Strat pickup or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and, the magnets were charged north up polarity, and it was wound, we would usually say, clockwise or counterclockwise. He had top going or top coming. Which is top travel.
Well, and I just remember, once again, talking about, the old guitar magazines and everything. And certainly, you've written for Vintage Guitar for years and you still write for two magazines now. But, talking about Seymour Duncan, I just always remember seeing him in the magazines, and for kids like you and I at the time, to get Seymour Duncans and load them into your guitar, it felt special. You know what I mean? It's like going, okay, well, now I'm elevating my instrument because I'm putting Seymour Duncans in this. And then when, you and I, you get to meet him at a NAMM show or something and talk with Seymour, it's just like, oh my gosh. It's like, it's mind blowing, but also what, like you said, what he did is, kind of demystifying the pickups, but also elevating them, just like, what you're doing with yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I very much so think that I am sort of following in his footsteps, kind of like what I'm doing is similar to what maybe he did in, say, 1979, 80, 81, 82, something like that. Sadly, his company is ran by his kids these days, and, a lot of overseas production, and it's kind of a whole different deal. But for me, it's still my two hands in this shop. At some point, I'll probably hire one or two more people. I found out, like Leo Fender found out, oh, so many years ago, the wire on a pickup is about the size of a human hair, and breaks about as easily too. And luckily, people can't tell, but I'm 5'3" tall, weigh about 125 pounds. So I'm the size of a small girl. And
But you are a pickup making machine.
and and for the most part, small girls make the best pickup winders. Delicate hands, good,
Right.
fine motor skills, good.
Well, and also,
hand.
Vaughn, we got to state, all of your pickups that you're doing, all of the ones you're offering, and with the rewinding of vintage pickups and doing custom ones like the one we talked about for me, um, these are all made in Nashville, Tennessee. So, I mean, these are made by hand in the U.S.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, with absolutely as many parts that are sourced locally as possible,
Mhm.
you know, uh, oh, what is the company in Portland, the stamping company that makes all my metal parts? We talked about
Oh,
Jeremy,
yeah, Jeremy.
advanced plating.
Mhm. Oh my gosh,
Just
they do so great. I'm gonna have Jeremy on the show too.
Yeah, well, just right down the road here, and they make all my metal parts. They make all of the butyrate bobbins. About the only, all of my fiber work, the top and bottom fiber,
Yeah.
comes from a company in New Jersey. About the only thing that probably comes from outside the country are the magnets themselves, because China has such, a grip on magnet
Right.
production. The
Right. But I know also, you and I were talking to where your guitar pickups, particularly your humbuckers now, have become very popular with guitarists in the last few years. Well,
Yeah,
especially with Paul Reed Smith guitars.
in particular, I've sold thousands of sets now that are specifically for PRS slash Paul Reed Smith guitars, and that happened, I guess it's been 5, 6 years ago. I watched a video with our buddy, Brian Wampler,
Uh-huh.
who had an SE, custom 22 or custom 24, I forget which one. Beautiful guitar with that green burst, and the beautiful top and all that. And, he had just got the guitar and he was doing a video on it, and he ended it up by basically saying, "Gosh, I love this guitar, but I just can't be in love with these pickups."
Yeah.
And so I called him up and said, "I am gonna send you a set of pickups that is going to make that your number one guitar." And I did, and he was kind enough to do a video then on the before and after,
What?
and the video's got hundreds of thousands of views, and it sold thousands of sets of pickups for me.
Well, but
Oh
also,
yeah,
and
how's
let's
that
say
sound?
this too, Vaughn, with Brian Wampler, which, I cover his pedals a lot in the magazines I write for and everything, but Brian is the epitome of a gear nerd. I mean, when he is using the guitars, using the amplifiers, defining the pedals and effects he's going to make, he wants everything to play and sound right, Vaughn. So what a huge compliment for you that Brian put those pickups in, and now that became his favorite guitar, and he did a video on it for you.
Yeah, so that basically ended up being some great publicity, and now for to go back just a little bit further, the reason I was able to say, I know I can nail this for you," is because I had a Paul Reed Smith Myra core model.
Love it.
The Myra is a real sort of straight up Les Paul Jr. type guitar,
Very
um,
straightforward.
and it had came to me from the player in Hawk Nelson. There we go, the band that we haven't heard of
I
for a
haven't heard
while,
that
but
name in a bit.
I hadn't heard that time, but, it had recorded all of their hits, and he had replaced the pickups with, oh, I think Gibson 57 Classics, which really so it was a real straight up Les Paul Jr. at that point, but it didn't do coil splitting anymore,
Right.
and we did a trade deal, and I got the guitar, and I was like, "Man, I want this to be the ultimate Paul Reed Smith that splits into single coil in a way that sounds really good,
Oh,
individual coil splits so that you can do, humbucker bridge, single coil neck, for instance." And that's when I designed those pickups. I spent like 6 months of all my spare time going, I wanna make this as good as I can for me. So,
and so really, so once again, the how you came up with these, humbuckers that everybody's buying, now for their Paul Reed Smith guitars was your own experimentation on a PRS Myra.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then
That's
after that, I
amazing.
got an SE, 22 myself and, put the same recipe in it and was like, "Oh, this is absolutely killer." My SE, is a Korean built one, they were done in Korea before now Indonesia.
Right.
Um, super, super high quality guitar.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I was gonna bring that up, Vaughn, to where, I've reviewed a number of them. They're, PRS American made and they're imports. And the SEs just blow my mind. You know, I mean, it's just like the quality, like you're saying. I mean, it's like going, oh my gosh, for
well,
the
that
money.
that Cork factory where they're made, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the tours of that factory, but they've got
Yeah.
like 5 buildings that go from the least expensive guitars to the most expensive, and the most expensive is the Paul Reed Smith line, the PRS guitars,
Yeah, for obvious reasons. You know what I
for
mean? But
obvious reasons.
but it's like those pickups of yours. So besides those, and I know you make a myriad of different pickups, and like we were talking the other day. I'm wanting to build a trash caster that is basically like has like one pickup, and you and I are going to work together to where you're going to make this one pickup for me, and it's going to do it all because all I
Well,
was
3
wanting is like
voices, yeah.
I know with three voices, but I want the 72 neck from my buddy Jay Butler, that I got it from him, and then I'm gonna do a body, and then your pickup, and so that when I plug it into any amplifier, if I plug it into my dad's '59 Bassman, it's just a tone machine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and I love working with builders of all level, from guys like you that are bolting parts together to,
Yeah.
like, my buddy John Kamerer, who does these most incredible concoctions that are
You know,
incredible. I love
I
working with
met
him.
John years ago, and once again talking about interesting builders, to where the way he does his concave body shells, and I mean, and his hand carved necks and everything. Once again, playable artwork. But,
Yep.
but John, fortunately, after being covered, I think in Premier Guitar Magazine, kind of had a resurgence, with his guitars, and he's been doing very well. But I mean, but what a great builder, Vaughn, for you to work with as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been working with him for quite a few years. Like I said, I love working with small builders who say, "I want something a little different than what I can get anywhere else." For him, like, for instance, I make Telecaster pickups that fit in a humbucker size shell, because he's got this quick change pickup system now where he can, pop pickups in and out with just
I
a
saw
little
that.
choo.
I saw that at the guitar show.
But the cutouts, are all humbucker size cutouts. So, if you want to put like a single coil pickup in a humbucker slot
Right.
and you want it to look right, you got to kind of make something a little special for that.
So you would say, once again, talking about your pickups, Vaughn, and I know you're still going to be doing some amplifiers again too, which is hard when you're the only guy and you have such a demand for your pickups. But besides the PRS replacement humbuckers, what do you feel like your other most popular pickups are right now?
Right now, all the humbuckers. I also have had a number of people on YouTube that have done videos on my 59 and 57 PAFs, which are the two main flavors of PAFs. The 57 is Alnico 2 magnet and just a little lighter wind. The 59 is Alnico 5 magnet. And those are the two main flavors of PAFs, if you will. But also early on, I worked with a lot of Nashville players to come up with Vaughn's Velvet Telecaster set. And that until the PRS thing kind of took over, that was my number one seller. Again, I worked with John Satella. I worked with Brian Wampler. I worked with, a lot of Kelly guys on that set.
Well, and also to bring that up, Vaughn, what a huge compliment that is to you, because as we know, the Nashville players, particularly the session musicians and touring musicians who, tour the world with these artists, they are very particular in the sound and play. And also their instruments, as you know, from being, out on the road for 7 years, they have to be road worthy so that no matter what city or country they're in, when they pull up there with the bus and hop on stage that night, those pickups have to perform and deliver consistently to the sound and the quality that they're looking for, right?
Yeah, those guitars are working man's tools, baby.
Right.
They need to
And,
be.
and we get, as collectors and players, we get to, search for it because, I know I want to do like a set of your 59s and in a Les Paul and all that, but these guys are using them as tools to pay their bills.
Right.
And so they got to perform.
Tools to pay their bills, but also to hopefully have a darn good time paying their bills.
Exactly. Well, and I was going to bring up too, what magazines are you writing for also? Because you've been, as I mentioned earlier, I think you had like 20 years with Vintage Guitar Magazine writing for them, which I always enjoyed your pieces. Who are you writing for now, Vaughn?
Just Front of House Magazine, which is a magazine that does pro audio, and Bass Musician Magazine, which is digital only. They don't actually deliver a magazine. I've been playing a lot of, you and I both play in praise and worship bands, and I've been playing a lot of bass for the last 5 years in praise and worship settings. So
that is so awesome. Yeah, because we're both using our in-ear monitors also. But, I used to joke on when I was playing praise and worship music in Las Vegas, and everybody's like, well, why aren't you on guitar? I'm like going, God needs bass players right now. And it's a lot because, my dad was a bass player. I've got his 59 Precision and his 59 Bassman that he worked away through college with. Yeah, you got to play those. But my main one is a Music Man sub bass that I was given as a gift. And it's like, that's just my main one I always use in praise team. But I enjoy playing bass, as I know you do. It just kind of anchors you. You know what I mean? Just to be able to do that. And particularly, like you said, you and I both playing in praise teams for so many years. It's just a great way to give back too.
Oh, as a sidebar that probably the viewers watching this will enjoy. Yeah, there is nothing quite like bass for being able to move the entire feel and emotion of a song.
Right.
Whether you're, playing whole notes or, thumping out straight eights or whatever, it totally changes the feel of the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think, and for me, growing up with a bass player, in the house to where it's like, my dad and I would go down to the basement, in Missouri, because everybody had a basement, and all of the PA and all the band equipment and he would just start laying down a groove, Vaughn, in a different key. I would have to find the key and play against that. And that's how he made me better. And so I've always, had to be around great bass players that could just play anything because, that's what I was raised around. And so in my head, I need that for the electric guitar to lay over.
Well, my dad taught me how to vaccinate cattle.
Which is also needed. I think everybody that ate that beef appreciated it. Well, and I wanted to bring up also a shout out to the sponsor for the show, which is the Acoustic Coffee Company. And so if you're watching or listening to our show, you can use the Gear Gab code, that is Gear Gab together, at Acoustic Coffee and get 20% off your first order. And I kind of feel like the price is right or something. And guests that appear on the Gear Gab show will be getting a bag of coffee also, as my friend Vaughn to go into his awesome cut. But I want to talk about too, Vaughn, we're talking about the pickups. When people come on to your website and everything, and they want to order pickups and they want to, talk with you, they're looking for something specific. What is the best way to do this? I mean, do they need to kind of have a sound in their head before they reach out to you, or what?
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of things. One, right now my website is being redesigned because I'm using we're recording this, by the way, since this will be out there for years. We're recording this spring of 2026. So this may be irrelevant information if you're watching it a year down the road or whatever. But right now my website's being redesigned because I'm changing payment providers.
Good.
And I will, for the first time in, so the pickup company, as Vaughn Skow Pickups, launched less than 10 years ago, but almost 10 years ago now. And for the first time since it became official, I'm going to be raising prices. I just have to. But I will also mention to any of your listeners, if you're watching this and it's still 2026, just send me a little message that says, I watched this on Eric Dahl's Gear Gab, and I will give you 2025 pricing. So there you go.
Thank you. So, and also, I mean, so what are you going to do? You told me before we started the show, Vaughn, to where you've got like 5 or 6 amp cabinets, and I've played through your amps before, and so
I am going to build this year in 2026. I am going to finish out the cabinets I built. I've got one of them here to show you. This is this is what my amps look like. They're
all wood.
Typically, typically it's real nice tight finger joints.
Finger joints on the corner with the wood.
Pine box with walnut accents.
Right.
And
blade looking logo at the top too.
Yeah. So my idea, okay, once again, my philosophy is that the greatest amps ever built were built during the pre-CBS Fender era. That's what I think. Some early Marshalls are very, very, very good as well.
Yeah.
But I think the tweeds and the brown and blonde Fenders, to me, were sort of the high water mark of amps, and most people would agree. So my amps are more or less tweed Fender designs with a little bit of the brown and blonde era pulled in as well. They got a little bit stiffer filtering than, say, for instance, tweeds do. Lots of times I offer mine with solid state rectifiers instead of tube rectifiers. Again, just if you want your amp to, the original Tweed Deluxe, for instance, falls apart real big time above about 2.5. If you wanted to have just a little bit more sturdy bottom end on it, for instance, that's usually what I get.
Yeah, look brighter. Yeah, and your amp sounds so good. I'm glad you're going to be doing some of those in your spare time. But also, I'm so excited, Vaughn, that the pickups have been selling so well that you are probably going to have to hire some people. And also, like you said, with the cost increases, I think people understand right now. I mean, because everything is costing more. But I also want to reaffirm that the Vaughn Skow pickups are handmade in the United States. And so you're getting a lot of great product with these pickups to put into your instrument. when you order them, right?
Yeah, it's very much like, I used to always feel like I needed to have a sign in the shop that says, "Welcome to, 1957, enjoy your stay," or something like that, It's very much like you're traveling back in time to old world craftsmanship.
Right. And you are in your shop right now.
I'm in my shop right now, yep.
I just think it's so awesome because, I've always enjoyed it too, seeing you at guitar shows and everything like that. And you're very proud of what you do. I want to make sure that listeners and viewers for the podcast know, I mean, you are a craftsman, Vaughn, with what you're doing with these pickups, with all the different models, all the different designs. And once again, like we mentioned earlier in the show, if you didn't catch it, that if you have an older guitar with pickups that are maybe starting to fade out or go microphonic, just I was thinking about like a lot of the ones like Jack White buys, to where it's like, these pickups are getting a little microphonic. You can send them to Vaughn and he can make them new again, right?
I had a guy who just a few days ago sent me the pick guard out of his 73 Strat, and this is the bridge pickup and the neck pickup, both of which are dead. And I will take this as an opportunity to say, folks, do not polish your electric guitar frets with steel wool. I've done blogs on this before as well, but both of these pickups were taken out by steel wool shards.
Oh my gosh.
Because what ends up
What does it do?
happening, well, steel wool, of course, you end up with all these little shards of steel, and this is a coil with a magnet inside it, and so all those little shards are attracted, and they'll start trying to worm their way through the coil to get to the magnet, and it may not happen at once, it may not happen in 5 years, it might take 10 or 15, but eventually, over all the years of shuffling, those little shards will work their way through the coil. And again, the wire is practically microscopic, so it doesn't take much to compromise it. And it's always easy to tell if that's what's happened because you'll see all the steel wool shards, stuck on the top of the magnets.
Oh my God.
And that's what happened with both of these. So, but yeah, these are now rebuilt. These are rewound to exact original factory specs because he wants to maintain the integrity of the guitar.
How amazing. And you're able to do that. So you're not just having to throw in replacement pickups in a vintage instrument. You can take those dead pickups or fading pickups, send them to you and get them rebuilt.
Yeah, sometimes, I've also been sent pickups where the guy says, it just sounds weaker than it used to. And I'll check. I've got a super handy dandy little amazing Gauss meter. These, by the way, are not made anymore, but I currently own the rights to it, and I want to make them, the Spin Doctors.
I think
but read the actual amount of Gauss at the pole pieces, and you might find that it's just been through one too many trips of the X-ray machine at the airport or something. And if it's
a lot of
the Gauss on these is usually about 100. I'm sorry, about 1,000. And I've had them come in where they're at 40.
Oh my God.
And you go, oh, I think I know what's wrong with this pickup.
Well, I want to make sure for viewers and listeners for the Gear Gab podcast, Vaughn, for your website that's going to be updated, for your social media, for everything you're doing with your pickups and your amplifiers, and certainly for your magazine writing as well. Where do they need to go, Vaughn?
Just vaughnskow.com, VAUGHNSKOW.com.
Well, I'll tell you, Vaughn, it was great having you on the show. I'm sure you're going to have to come back on again down the road. But congratulations on your incredible pickups and the new amps that are going to be built this year as well. It's a treat catching up. I can't wait to work with you for doing my custom pickup for my Stratocaster that we're going to do also, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and congratulations to the amazing success that you've been having too, my friend. Nobody deserves it as much as you.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. Bye.
Thanks for joining the Gear Gab Podcast with Eric Dahl. Subscribe to our weekly conversations on your favorite platform. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Gear Gab Podcast. You'll never know who our next guests will be.